Hello and welcome back to Key Comic Universe. And how much is your comic book collection worth? But before I get into this topic, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, I would highly recommend it. Plus, you'll get updates when I release new videos, and I have more content coming. Also, check me out on Instagram at Key Comic Universe, where I will do comic sales as well as talk about other topics. And you can also reach out to me on there. So, yeah. Okay, so I want to first start by saying I have evaluated a lot of comic collections throughout the years. I have done a lot more in the past year and a half than I've done ever before. I've evaluated about, and this isn't like a huge number. I'm not like, well known or anything like that, so I don't get tons of people being like, hey, can you take a look at my comic collection? But I've done about 10 to 15, which isn't too bad, and that's not including people who want to sell their collections. I get a lot more of those, and I've bought quite a few collections over the last year. So, first up, and if you want me to evaluate your collection as well, reach out to me on Instagram. I'm always happy to help out with evaluations. But first up, let's talk about types of comics. So there are different eras, publishers, and key and non-key books. For the eras, you have books from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so forth. Books from like the 50s and earlier will be like 10 cents. Books from the 60s will range from 10 to 12 cents, maybe even 15 cents towards the end. Books from the 70s, 80s, those ones will typically range from 20 cents all the way up to about 60 cents. So those are kind of the different ranges and the different like cover prices you'll see. Next, publishers, there's Marvel, DC, and then all the other ones. So that's usually how I separate the three out. Those are the main types that you'll be looking at. You're not going to separate two independent publishers from each other typically, because usually there's not a big price difference between one publisher to the next, except for in very rare instances. And finally, keys versus non-keys. This is where the importance, precedence, and the value typically comes from. So key comics typically feature first appearances, deaths of characters, big events, and these books are typically worth more because they're more in demand. And, if you want to go after a specific character, or if you want to own a really big piece of history, getting a character's first appearance ever is one of the best ways to do that. So people look for keys more than non-keys unless they're doing a full run or looking for fillers. Outside of that, keys are typically what's in demand. Okay, next, for talking about evaluation, you have to look at what type of books you have. And I'm not talking about like the ones I just talked about, but I mean like what is like the specific books you own. For example, Batman books, like Marvel's Avengers, or do you own a lot of like Spider-Man? Because all those different types can have different values associated with them. Also, if you're going to sell your collection, like after getting an evaluation, if you're looking to sell, you also have to consider if you want to sell your collection as a whole or sell parts of your collection. And also, when you're getting an appraisal, it doesn't mean that you're going to sell your collection, but can help out with getting an idea of what your collection is worth. And I will definitely go more into like, what you want out of an appraisal and what you should expect. But if you're going to sell off your whole collection, I want to put this out there. You're probably going to get less per book than you would if you sold off parts. The reason? The people who are going to buy a whole collection aren't comic collectors. It's comic sellers, vendors, and comic book stores. People who buy parts of collections are typically the collectors and are typically willing to spend more money for an individual book they really want versus buying a bunch of books they don't want, which they usually won't. And that's where you're going to see two different ways of moving and two different ways of kind of finding the value of your collection on when you sell it. So, selling as a whole, if you're going to sell your books, and let's just say the majority of your books are bulk, and it's a large, mid-range, even maybe a smaller collection, for those bulk books, you shouldn't really expect a lot of money. And by a lot of money, I mean you're probably going to get anywhere between 10 cents to maybe certain comic shops offering as high as 25 cents per book. But you really shouldn't even really expect 25 cents. You should be thinking more around 10 cents per book for bulk books, because comic shops aren't going to be buying your books at top dollar or anywhere close to top dollar, because the more books you bring in and the more bulk there is, it means more time, more work, and more effort for them to hopefully sell the books as well as grade and price out the books. So a lot of those books, they might price out at between $1 to maybe $3 each. So, it sounds like they're making a lot of money because they're making like $2.90 a book, but you also have to consider time, effort, and so forth that comic shops have to put in. So when you're selling to a comic seller, comic shop, wherever, don't expect a lot of money for the bulk books. Now for the keys, you can of course expect more value. Now you should maybe, from what I've seen, expect anywhere between 40 to 60% per book, but that's pretty much the maximum I've seen. Now, if you're going to sell to actual collectors, basically selling your collection off in parts, what you should expect is getting pretty close to fair market value. You're going to make a lot more money selling your books off for parts. The books that you might get 10 to 25 cents for from a comic shop or from a comic seller, you could get $1 to $3 per book. But, and here's a but, it's going to take a lot more time. You're going to have to put in the effort to do it correctly because people, they want to know as much information about the book as possible. You're not going to have as many people wanting to buy a book with like one image and no description versus a book where you give a full description, grade, all that type of stuff. Because the more information available, it makes it easier to sell those books. But if you're selling off in parts, again, don't expect to sell everything in one day, 1 month, even a year. It's going to take a lot of time, especially if your collection is larger. The larger it is, the more time it's going to take. Next, I should be a little bit get more into this as well, but I don't think I fully answered this question yet. What makes your comics valuable? How do you find your valuable comics? So, the older your books are, this typically means that there's going to be more value behind them. And that's typically with, a lot of this. Because the reason is, there are a lot of books from the 50s or 60s that go for nothing. What books are money? So if you're looking at books from the 40s, 50s, 60s, superhero books are always big, especially for Marvel and DC. The more well-known, the better for the most part. Keys. First appearances, deaths of, all that type of stuff. Good money. Books that have 10 cent or 12 cent covers, they'll typically get a bit more money just because of the precedence. Horror. Horror is popular, certain crime books, even certain romance. But if you compare those I just listed to the ones that you see a lot of, which are like cartoon books, funny books, you got stuff like most romance books, most westerns, whether it's 50s, 60s, 70s onwards, you probably won't get very much money for them. Independent books typically don't go for very much money, especially books from the 90s. 99.9% of those are pretty much junk. Like, literally just junk. And that's not meant to be offensive or anything because there are good stories. But a lot of them were overprinted and overvalued at the time. And there aren't very many collectors looking to get those. And if there are, they aren't looking to spend a lot of money as well because those books don't really have a lot of demand. And that's the other thing. Demand. Books with high demand, even non-keys, just good books with high demand, those will go for more money. Because if people are willing to spend $100, $200, $300, and so on for an individual book, the demand's there. As opposed to a book like that's $1 and people aren't even buying it at $1. So that's one thing that you also have to consider. Another way to kind of determine evaluation is look at what your books that you own have sold for in the past. Go on eBay, look at sold listings, compare them to current listings even, compare condition, all that type of stuff, and you should be able to come out to a pretty good rough estimate of value. The other thing that you should also consider with this is that, again, even for your keys, comic shops, comic sellers aren't going to offer you full value. They won't offer you anything close to it for the most part. So, again, that's just something you have to consider. Next is junk comics. I kind of covered that just a bit, but other junk comics are, let's say, books from the 1960s, like a lot of war books, a lot of romance, that westerns, that type of stuff. Might get a seller here who's willing to offer you a bit more for them, but for the most part, you're not going to get very much out of those books as compared to superhero comics and others. Funny books are one of the lowest selling books, like I'm talking like Gold Key Disney, unless it's like a key, which there are keys of those, unless it's a key, even the old ones, you can't get very much money for and aren't going to sell super well. Okay, next, I should also mention one more thing, is that during an evaluation, there are companies who will do it for free. There are people who will do it for free. I'm just going to name one of them who I think are pretty much the best at evaluating, which is Sell My Comics, or Sell My Comic Books. You can check them out. They do free evaluations, super awesome people, and they also are some really good sellers. I also do evaluations. I'm not as well known, obviously, but I'm also willing to do it for free. And also, I've had people ask to sell me their collection, basically try and get me to buy their collection in the past. And I want to give just some of my own personal experience for this and different types of conversations I've had with people. Number one, you have people who are just looking to move the books. These are the type of people who just want their books gone. And typically I can come to a deal with them pretty easily and pretty quickly if they're really motivated to move their books, need the cash, etc. Then you have people who are looking to sell their books, but they want, close as possible fair market value. Now, typically these people, and again, a lot of these people are awesome people. I still talk to a lot of these people to this day, whether I bought from them or not. But anyways, I usually don't come to as many deals with them because typically their asking prices are too high and we're just going to be too far apart. Like anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000s difference does occur and has happened. And then you got people who think they want to sell, but as soon as you bring in your rates and talk about where you're buying at, they're like, no, I don't want to sell anymore. I'm just going to sell things off in parts. And that's also completely understandable. And finally got people who really think they want to sell, but really, really, really don't want to sell. And other people should just, they aren't really interested in anything except for one number that they've already come up with, and they don't want to sell. And then you also have, subcategories of different types of people you're going to deal with who want to sell their collections. Also, people want their books appraised. Typically, that goes pretty smoothly. I just tell them, hey, this is how much you can expect if you sell things off in whole, and this is how much you can expect if you were to piece things out. And that's a whole different conversation, but yeah, it's just two different ways of doing things, and I've done both before. But with buying, a lot of time, when buying books, when buying collections, I like to let people know my rates ahead of time. As soon as someone DMs me, reaches out to me online, reaches out to me in person, anything like that, the first thing I bring up is my rates. And, I'm willing to talk about my rates as well on here. So, for a typical back issue, and I'm talking bulk back issue, whether we're mainly modern, I will pay around 20 to 25 cents for most. There are a few exceptions, but for most of them, I'm paying 20 to 25 cents. For, decent, further back issues that don't have value behind them, that are, under $10, I'm talking more like bronze, silver, that don't have value. I'm willing to pay up to 50 cents to maybe $1 if it's in real nice shape and if I think I can sell it. Then, for, minor keys or just decent books, books that aren't keys but are just, really good books that have nonetheless, I'm willing to pay around a few dollars, maybe less, just depends on where the current market is. That's basically 90% of books I deal with. That's 90% of them right there of the books I deal with. And that doesn't add up to very much. But then for keys, I always try to beat out other people's rates. And, I think I'm still behind on some other people's rates. I probably don't have the best, offer of all time for people. But I try to make my offers fair and reasonable. For keys, I offer typically 50 to 60% of retail value. So that's pretty much where I come in at. That's where I offer at. I think for the most part, if you compare that to LCSs or you compare it to certain other comic book sellers, it does beat out their rates. And finally, what to expect after you do a sale, or what to expect during your time when you're selling. If you're selling off in parts, you're basically just playing the waiting game. Eventually, you're going to probably sell most, if not all, of the books over a very long time period, but you're going to be waiting for quite a while. If you're selling off as a whole, you get that one payment, you get the money all at once, and you're done. You're probably not going to make as much as selling things off in parts, but you're still making money. And then holding, if you just want to evaluate, you'll get a very, I think from other people, you'll get a very fair evaluation. Or if you evaluate stuff yourself using eBay or other websites that track previous sales, like price charting, anything like that, you'll also get a fair value and get a comprehensive way of looking at what your books are worth. And let's see, what else I want to cover? Oh yeah, one more thing. If you have a huge collection and most of it's bulk, you should expect less for each individual book on average because of time and because of, how long it's going to take to sell. If you have a very small collection and let's say it's mostly bulk, but there are some keys, then you might get a little bit more money just because it's going to take less time for a person to go through it. Now, I'm not talking about total sum number. I'm talking on average per each book. Because, you could have like 10,000 books and they'll get, a lower valuation than what you would be expecting. And you could have like, let's say 100 books, but if they're all really, really good books, you get a pretty fair offer if you're trying to sell them as a whole. There's plenty of other people who talked about the subject in the past. I'm not original when I'm talking about the subject. I'm just adding my own take and my own thought process and how I do this myself. If you want to see some other people talk about this subject, check out some of my comic books. They really helped me out with this idea and kind of covering some of the things that I felt like, should be covered as well. And then also I think, what's his name? Giorno. Giorno's comics and pop culture, also super helpful dude with comics. He's really good at explaining his thoughts as well, and his topic, I just added a little bit to his as well. But anyways, again, this isn't like a wholly original idea. It's just, again, my take on it, my process, and covering the topics as well in detail. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Check me out on Instagram. Like, comment, and subscribe. All that fun stuff. If I missed anything, let me know. I know that I missed stuff in the past with these videos where I just watched over a specific topic or something like that. And yeah, if I missed anything or if I wasn't clear, let me know. I'd be happy to answer anything through Instagram, YouTube, whatever it may be. Peace.